Dr. Marcacius then began looking through the telescope. "Have you found anything?" George asked. "No," said Dr. Marcacius. Several seconds later, Dr. Marcacius' quarter van ran out, and he said it was George's turn. "George, it's your turn," said Dr. Marcacius. "Quarter, please," George asked Hannah. George then gave George a quarter. Thank you, said George. George then stuck the quarter into the telescope. "I don't see anything suspicious at Midway Airport," said George. "I don't want to risk it, though," said Dr. Marcacius. "What do you mean by that?" George asked. I then began pointing at the telescope on the south side of the west windows. Yes, Sam, that is exactly what I want to do. I want to get a view from the other side." I then gave a thumbs up. It was about 10 seconds in, then I heard the magic words from George. "It ran out," said George. I'll look at it from the south side of the west windows first," said Dr. Marcacius. Dr. Marcacius then stuck his quarter in, and then he began looking at Midway Airport through the telescope. "Nope," said Dr. Marcacius. George then sat down, and then he looked through the telescope. "Nope," said George. We then began walking up to the west through the west windows, heading north, and then we began looking to the due west. "Can you see smoke still from where Garfield Park Conservatory was?" George asked. "Yes," answered Dr. Marcacius. "You can see a giant puff of smoke through the window of the west side of Chicago where Garfield Park was, and I was the one who did that." "Don't feel bad," said Dr. Marcacius, rubbing my back. I smiled. "Good," said Dr. Marcacius. We then walked to the north side of the west windows, and we saw O'Hare. "George, look at O'Hare through the west telescope on the north windows, and I will look through the north telescope on the west windows," said Dr. Marcacius. "Sure thing," said George. I didn't need to point for O'Hare because it is such a big airport. I didn't need to point at it. "Nothing," said Dr. Marcacius. "Nothing," said George. I then heard both their quarters ran out. "Switch," said Dr. Marcacius. Dr. Marcacius and George then switched telescopes. "Nothing," said Dr. Marcacius. "Nothing," said George. I then heard both of their quarters run out. "Do you think we could be invaded from the west?" George asked. "Only from the airports," answered Dr. Marcacius. "Is that possible?" George asked. "Any form of invasion is possible," Dr. Marcacius answered. We then went to look at the north entirely. "Can you see Howard?" Hannah asked. I tried looking for it like 2 or 3 minutes, but I was not able to find it, unfortunately. I gave a thumbs down. "That is okay," said Hannah. Howard is also not the size of O'Hare Airport, so it makes it a lot more difficult to see, even though it is closer to us than O'Hare is. I gave a thumbs up. "Can we see the Six Flags from here?" Hannah asked. "Possibly not, because it's like 30 miles north of here, and that I think we can see in the day," Dr. Marcacius was saying before I interrupted him. I was tapping Dr. Marcacius' shoulder gently. "What is it?" Dr. Marcacius asked. "I was able to see the Six Flags because it was so far up and the nights were lit." "No time for there now," said Hannah. "I know," said Dr. Marcacius. I still was not able to see Howard. "Could the North invade us?" George asked. "Yes, anyone could." We then arrived back at the east windows. "Sam, is that guy you knocked out still out?" Dr. Marcacius asked. I then took a look at that guy myself, and he was still out cold. I gave a thumbs up. "Who wants to go on the glass with me?" Dr. Marcacius asked. "Sure," said George. "Okay," said Hannah. I gave a thumbs up, because I knew in my heart that it was going to help me with my fear of flying. Flying? Flying? I beat my fear with how I led the flight from Detroit to Chicago to here. Hey, that rhymes, I thought to myself. I then began smiling, and no one knew my biggest fear. I beat my biggest fear because I've been so preoccupied the past few days. Were you smiling about? Doctor Marcacius asked as I was walking onto the glass deck. I did nothing. Does nothing mean you will tell me when we save Mom? Doctor Marcacius asked. I then gave a thumbs up. Okay, said Doctor Marcacius. What would you say is the safest way to get to Robbinsog from here? George asked. I'm trying to figure that out, said Doctor Marcacius. I then began smiling because I know I got an idea. You seem smiley, said Doctor Marcacius. I nod. What are you trying to tell us? Doctor Marcacius asked. I then brought out my phone and began typing on my notepad until Doctor Marcacius interrupted me. It is okay. You said that you will tell us when we save Mom, said Doctor Marcacius. I gave a thumbs up. Do you think they can see us up here? Hannah asked. On the glass? Doctor Marcacius asked. Yes, Hannah answered. Not at night, said Doctor Marcacius. What about during the day? George asked. Maybe, but I doubt it, said Doctor Marcacius. There was a pause, as Doctor Marcacius, I could tell, was looking at what to say next. I'm glad I finally did this, said Doctor Marcacius. I then saw Doctor Marcacius had some tears in his eyes. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Hannah asked. Because it's a tragedy. I wasn't able to do this, said Doctor Marcacius. Me too, said George. I thought George was about to begin crying, but he wasn't going to. I then began to rub Dr. Marcacius' back because he was doing that to me a few minutes ago. Thanks, Sam, said Dr. Marcacius. I then gave a thumbs up. I want to come here for my birthday next year, said Dr. Marcacius. Me too, said Hannah. Dr. Marcacius and Hannah then kissed on the lips. I love you, said Dr. Marcacius. I love you too, said Hannah. Dr. Marcacius and Hannah began sitting on the glass. That doesn't scare you? George asked. Nope, said Dr. Marcacius. Nope, said Hannah. To each their own, said George. I personally wasn't willing to sit on the glass, but I was looking out at that view of downtown Chicago. Beautiful, said Hannah. Not as beautiful as you, said Dr. Marcacius. Oh, you, said Hannah. I felt that view of downtown Chicago was one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen. I thought that view I got from the 7th floor of our building where Robbinsog is good enough, George said. You want to live up here now? Dr. Marcacius asked. Maybe on the 20th floor by the pool, answered George. We then all laughed. George then looked down on the ground below. Oh, said George. What is it, Dr. Marcacius asked. People just entered the ground floor, said George. Shit, said Dr. Marcacius. Dr. Marcacius and Heaven then got up. This is my time to shine, I thought. I then began changing into my hang glider. What are you doing? Dr. Marcacius asked. I then began pointing at Robbinsog. I think we should do as he says, because I think he's pointing at Robbinsog, recommended George. Oh, Dr. Marcacius, George and Hannah then began changing into their hang gliders too. What do you want us to do? Dr. Marcacius asked. Be ready to be airborne at any time, I thought to myself. I then placed a tear gas bomb at the two front corners of the glass deck. What are you doing? Dr. Marcacius asked. I then stuck one bullet into the other gun. What are you doing? Hannah asked. Getting us to Robbinsog, I thought. I then lit the tear gas bombs.